Hey guys. Tonight, you're standing in a cold stone corridor that smells faintly of roses and rust. The torchlight trembles against tapestries, showing scenes of soft crowns and perfect smiles. A draft slips through the hall, and you hear the echo of silk shoes tapping somewhere far away. A princess's room waits at the end, curtains drawn, mirrors covered, perfume heavy enough to hide fear. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. You step closer, expecting warmth, gold, and laughter. Instead, you find a room colder than the hallway. The fire burned low, the jewels locked away, the silence full of rules. A lady in waiting folds linen without looking up. The air carries beeswax, wilted flowers, and something lonely. The truth is, the princess fantasy was written by people who never had to live it. Tonight, we'll walk behind the velvet curtain, where gowns were heavy, smiles were armor, and freedom was the one luxury no crown could buy. The room smells of beeswax and wilted roses, the perfume of exhausted beauty. In the corner, a gown waits on its stand, stiff, shining, enormous. Velvet dyed deep wine red, sleeves wide enough to hide secrets, bodice tight enough to strangle them. You can almost hear the fabric sigh under its own ambition. Before she even puts it on, the princess knows the gown is not clothing, it's policy stitched by other people's hands. Seamstresses worked through the night under candlelight, their eyes stinging from smoke and silk dust. They whispered prayers over each stitch, hoping the thread wouldn't snap, because when it did, punishment came quicker than sympathy. Gold thread, imported dyes, pearls sewn by the dozen. The garment glimmered with proof of empire. Each bead had a story. One stolen from a merchant's ship, another traded for a servant's future. Every shine was paid for by someone else's dull day. When the gown finally touched her skin, it was cold, heavy, and judgmental. A dozen hands pulled laces tighter, forcing her waist to match a fantasy invented by men who would never wear one. Breathing became optional. Standing still was mandatory. Every inch of her became exhibit space, a message to the room. Our bloodline is flawless, our kingdom stable, our daughter obedient. The fabric smiled for her, even when she couldn't. Movement turned into ritual. To walk, she had to plan each step like diplomacy. Measured, smooth, small enough not to ripple the brocade. The shoes pinched, the weight pressed on her ribs. Her heart beat politely under the corset's logic. Grace, they said, was proof of virtue. But you know what grace really meant, suppressing pain so elegantly that no one flinched watching you suffer. A quiet miracle performed daily and never applauded. Silk and velvet clung to her like expectations. If the queen fainted from heat, people whispered about devotion. If a servant fainted, it was laziness. Suffering had hierarchy too. You'd think jewels would comfort her, but they only reminded her of debt to family, to throne, to image. Every glittering stone said, "Don't move too fast, don't breathe too deep, don't ruin the painting we've made of you." She obeyed because that's what the canvas demanded. Beneath the perfume, there was always the scent of iron, the smell of corset hooks, of hairpins biting scalp. The powder on her face itched, the rouge cracked like a lie drying in the sun. She smiled anyway. Not smiling wasn't allowed. The smile was her second crown, heavier than the first. It told everyone that perfection didn't hurt. that she was grateful for the privilege of suffocating beautifully, and people believed it. They always do. At court, her dress became a conversation before she even spoke. Men discussed its cost, women its stitching, priests its modesty. No one asked if she liked it. Fashion, after all, was a political language, and she was fluent by force. Every outfit was an argument that she belonged exactly where she stood, visible, admired, powerless. That's the dark comedy of it. The world worshipping a figure who could hardly lift her own sleeves without permission. Night brought no relief. The gown had to be brushed, hung, and scented again. Servants peeled it off her inch by inch, like removing armor from a weary knight. Underneath, bruises bloomed quietly along her ribs, purple reminders of posture. The fire had burned low by then, and the air smelled of wax and old perfume. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and saw not herself, but an invention that demanded constant repair. Sometimes she'd imagine walking barefoot in the courtyard, just once, feeling cold stone without silk in between. But even imagination required caution. Fantasy was her only rebellion, and even that was policed by guilt. She wondered if freedom would feel too light, if she might float away without the weight of fabric to remind her who she was supposed to be. Heavy dresses make sure thoughts stay grounded. That was the point. The gowns told stories of empire, but none of the women wearing them were the authors. Every hemline spoke of labor, of cost, of control disguised as beauty. A princess didn't rule, she decorated power. She was the proof that her father could afford obedience. It's strange, isn't it? How we still call it elegant when it's really engineering. A system of laces and expectations that tighten together until breathing looks divine. When she finally lay down, the bruises pressed against linen sheets, scented with lavender and duty. Sleep didn't come easily. Her ribs still remembered the corset, her shoulders the weight of jewels. She dreamt of dresses made of nothing, no silk, no gold, no agenda, just air. But even dreams had etiquette. In the morning, she'd wake to the rustle of fabric, the sound of servitude. The dress waited, patient, knowing she'd return. And she always did. Because what choice does a symbol have? The gown was her ghost, and she was its heartbeat. History would later paint her as radiant, noble, blessed. No one would smell the metal or count the bruises. That's the dark truth behind the fantasy. The crown never hurt half as much as the corset, and the fairy tale never mentioned that she dressed every day for an audience that never truly looked. The air feels heavy here, thick with incense, honeyed wax, and the faint dampness of stone that never truly dries. A single window lets in pale light, more like a memory than the sun itself. Curtains of embroidered silk ripple in a draught that smells faintly of rain and confinement. You can almost taste the quiet. This is the kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it watches. Every sound feels like a trespass. Even your breath seems to bow. This is the princess's private chamber, though private is a generous word. Servants come and go without knocking, their slippers whispering on the rushes. Nothing in this room belongs entirely to her, not even her reflection. The mirror was chosen by the queen, the tapestries by her tutor, the prayers by the chaplain. She sleeps in a bed carved from other people's decisions. The mattress sighs when she moves, as if remembering everyone else who's waited here, politely trapped. Outside, bells mark the hours, each one another reminder that time is not hers. Morning prayers, embroidery, music, practice, supper, prayer again. The schedule is mercy disguised as control. Idleness is dangerous, it breeds thought. So the day is filled until there's no room left for imagination. The church calls it discipline, the court calls it refinement. She calls it what it is, the art of living someone else's calendar. If she leans close to the window, she can just see the stables below, the flash of a horse's flank, a groom's laughter, the unashamed rhythm of life that smells of sweat and hay. For a moment, she envies even the stable girl who can step outside without permission. Freedom, she realizes, doesn't mean owning much. It means being allowed to move when you wish. Here, movement itself is a privilege stamped with a seal. Letters are censored before they leave her hand. A lady-in-waiting reads them first, pretending not to. The princess writes about weather and prayer because that's what's allowed. Anything more personal is gently edited out, replaced with pious politeness. You can almost see the ink hesitate before the quill touches paper. Secrets don't last long in a place where privacy is a rumor. Even her sighs feel rehearsed, shaped to sound graceful when overheard. The walls are covered with woven saints and heroes, stories of courage she isn't permitted to imitate. A maiden slays a dragon. Another ascends to heaven with her dignity intact. None of them look tired or lonely or late for their own life. She studies the tapestries until her eyes blur, trying to find some message hidden in the threads. Maybe endurance was the dragon after all. Maybe the miracle was surviving boredom beautifully. At dusk, candles turn the room into liquid gold. Shadows stretch long, as if trying to leave. A maid brushes her hair 100 times, counting under her breath. The comb smells of rosemary oil and old wood. Each stroke feels like the day being erased, and yet, when she looks in the mirror, the same eyes wait for her. Nothing has changed except the angle of exhaustion. She smiles anyway. Practice makes permanence. Sometimes, when everyone's asleep, she tiptoes to the door and listens. Beyond it, the castle breathes differently, freer, looser, imperfect. She hears footsteps, laughter, an argument muffled by distance. Life sounds unsupervised out there. She doesn't dare open the door. Locks aren't the only things that keep people in. Fear does the job better. Still, her hand rests on the handle for a heartbeat too long. A rebellion that ends in silence is still rebellion. The bed is enormous, dressed in linen embroidered with prayers she doesn't remember learning. The sheets are cool, smelling of rosewater and starch. She lies perfectly still, because even sleep has etiquette. If she turns too much, the maid will notice in the morning and report it as restless conduct. Imagine being judged by the shape of your dreams. She stares at the canopy until her thoughts start whispering escape routes through the patterns in the fabric. When storms come, she can't resist unlatching the window. Rain rushes in, cold and electric, touching her face like applause from the sky. For a few seconds, she belongs to herself. Hair unpinned, nightgown clinging, laughter trembling in her throat. Then she closes it again before anyone notices. Freedom visits like weather, briefly, beautifully, and never on schedule. She wipes the sill dry with her sleeve and calls it repentance. Some nights she prays, not for mercy but for novelty. A change in the air, a visitor with bad manners, anything to break the perfect pattern of piety. The saints on her wall stare down with sympathy or judgment, she can't tell which. She wonders if heaven ever gets bored. Then she laughs softly, the sound small but real. The echo stays, hiding behind the curtains, as if grateful to exist at all. And every morning, the same ritual begins again. Sunlight, lace, instruction, correction. She wears her obedience like another dress. The world outside imagines she lives in luxury. Inside, she knows its choreography. The castle glows for visitors, but inside its stones lies the hum of captivity, constant and polite. Fairy tales call it grace. History calls it training. She calls it Tuesday, and that's the truest thing she'll ever be allowed to say. Morning arrives shyly, filtered through gauze curtains that turn sunlight into polite suggestion. On the vanity, the mirror waits, tall, silvered, a patient conspirator. The air smells of rose water, chalk, and the faint bite of vinegar used to cleanse the glass. You can almost hear the rustle of fabrics being laid out behind her. The day hasn't started yet, but the performance has. The first act is always the face. Servants bring trays of powders and jars, crushed pearls for shimmer, white lead for purity, rouge for warmth, soot for definition. It's a small apothecary of deception. Each dab, each brushstroke carries the quiet weight of approval. Pale skin means wealth. Red lips mean health. Lashes dark as ink mean vigilance. She is expected to embody every virtue at once, even the contradictory ones. You wonder how many layers it takes to hide a pulp. The powders smell faintly metallic, almost medicinal. Beauty was science without safety, lead poisoning disguised as elegance. Skin turned grey, teeth darkened, headaches whispered quietly behind fans. No one called it illness, they called it devotion. Devotion to appearance, to lineage, to the fragile theatre of perfection. In that world, survival often came powdered and perfumed, one breath away from poison. They said, "She glows." They never asked why. The mirror learned her rhythms better than any tutor. It knew the precise angle of light that flattered. It remembered which expressions earned compliments and which earned lectures. Mirrors in palaces didn't reflect truth. They rehearsed it. A princess practiced not being surprised by her own reflection. The girl behind the paint and the woman before the world weren't enemies. They were business partners in a long-term lie. Even smiling was strategic, too wide, and it suggested vanity, too small, and it hinted at melancholy. Her face was a treaty. It negotiated every morning for the survival of her reputation. When she met the mirror's gaze, she didn't see herself. She saw everyone else's expectations painted neatly onto her skin. A human mood board of ambition, duty, and fear, framed in silver, updated daily. By midday, her skin felt tight, her scalp burned from pins, but compliments came like coin, exchanged, counted, and spent. "Radiant," someone said. "Serene," another murmured. The words floated like incense, sweet and hollow. They didn't describe her. They described success. And that, in this world, was close enough. The mirror approved with silence. Silence is the most expensive praise. At night, when the candles died down, she'd wipe it all away. The cloth came back streaked with white, red, and regret. The mirror, unkind under moonlight, returned her an unfamiliar face, younger, almost wild, skin blotched from lead, eyes too alive for comfort. That was the dangerous version of herself, the one that remembered laughter, hunger, movement, the one that wouldn't survive daylight. Sometimes she'd draw on the fogged mirror with her finger. Small shapes, initials, a question mark, she'd wipe away before it dried. It was the only honest conversation she had all day. The mirror never judged scribbles. They vanished too quickly to be recorded. She envied that kind of freedom, to exist briefly, beautifully, without being catalogued. Other women envied her beauty, not realizing it was a full-time job. Beauty, like monarchy, had no weekends. Even dreams couldn't escape its standards. She once dreamed her reflection refused to move with her, a rebellion made of glass. She woke shaking, certain that part of her had stayed behind. Maybe it had. Mirrors keep what they're shown, they always do. The next morning, the routine began again. Cold water, warm cloth, white powder, red lips, patience. She didn't hate it. Hate required energy. What she felt was closer to resignation's little sister, the quiet nod of someone who knows the game and plays it anyway. The mirror watched her finish, reflecting the practiced perfection of someone who's mastered both endurance and disguise. Before leaving the room, she glanced back once, not to admire but to check. Everything was in place. The paint, the posture, the pretense. History would later call her beautiful. But beauty is just control made visible. And the mirror, loyal to tradition, lied one last time before she turned away. The dining hall smells of fire, polished metal, and slow-cooked diplomacy. Candles drip their patience down the walls while servants move in choreographed silence. The princess sits beneath a canopy, her plate gleaming like an award she didn't ask for. Music hums faintly in the background. Not enough to enjoy, just enough to remind everyone to whisper. Hunger here isn't physical, it's political. Appetite must be exhibited, not satisfied. Each course arrives like a parade. Roasted peacock dyed blue with herbs, gilded pies, candied roots sculpted into flowers. The air tastes like sweetness, layered over exhaustion. Every dish means something. Wealth, conquest, lineage. Even the color of the sauce carries intent. The kitchen downstairs sweats through chaos while upstairs the illusion holds steady. It's a miracle of logistics disguised as luxury, and she plays her part with quiet precision. Her fork trembles slightly, but only from etiquette. She must take small bites, chew delicately, avoid pleasure. Pleasure is vulgar when you're supposed to symbolize restraint. The irony would be funny if it weren't so ancient. The court watches how she lifts her spoon, as if measuring the kingdom's moral balance in the angle of her wrist. Somewhere deep inside, she laughs, not loudly, but enough to remember she's still human. Across the table, nobles exchange pleasantries, sharp as daggers wrapped in compliments. Conversation dances around gossip, ambition, and mild cruelty, disguised as humor. Her task is to listen without reacting, nod without agreeing. Being interesting would be dangerous. Being invisible is safer. She sips watered wine that tastes of metal and patience. The goblet's reflection shows a smile perfectly symmetrical and perfectly fake. The food grows cold while the hierarchy stays warm. Servants glide in rhythm, refilling, replacing, retreating. No one looks at them long enough to see exhaustion. The princess notices, well, she always does. but noticing is the one luxury she can't afford. Compassion, in her position, is a liability, so she files it away with other forbidden feelings: laughter, anger, appetite. It's impressive how disciplined suffering can become. Below stairs, the kitchen roars, pans clanging, steam hissing, orders shouted like battle cries. The scent of butter and smoke would make her mouth water if she were allowed to have cravings. Instead, she swallows them. Every bite she takes is a performance for people who expect perfection even in digestion. History loves to call these scenes banquets, but really they were audits of manners, monitored by candlelight. Sometimes a single wrong gesture could ripple for weeks. A dropped napkin, a misplaced glance, too much salt on the tongue. Power feeds on symbolism, not sustenance. The peasants might eat to live, but royalty lived to be watched eating. You realize how bizarre it is to measure grace by crumbs and policy by posture. Even breathing too loudly could be read as dissent. So she learned to inhale quietly and exhale invisible. When the music swelled, she finally tasted something sweet. Not from the food, but from the relief of applause. The feast was ending. No one clapped, of course, but the scraping of chairs was victory enough. Servants swept away untouched plates, wiping evidence of fatigue into oblivion. The hall smelled of cooled wax and faint wine, like a candlelit afterthought. Her hunger remained perfectly intact, the evening's most loyal companion. Later, in her chamber, she'd eat a crust of bread left from breakfast. No ceremony, no silver, just silence. It tasted better than anything from the banquet. That's the thing about deprivation. It sharpens honesty. You stop lying to your stomach and start listening to your bones. They don't care about politics. They only want warmth. And warmth, like truth, is rarely served upstairs. She sometimes wondered what her life would taste like if it belonged to her. Maybe like the kitchen stew, rough, imperfect, nourishing. Maybe like fruit picked straight from the orchard, still warm from sunlight instead of candle heat. The thought was dangerous but comforting. Fantasies are safest when they stay edible. Tomorrow night, the feast would happen again. Same music, same faces, same hunger disguised as grace. She'd smile, lift her goblet, and pretend the silver didn't reflect a prisoner. History will remember her posture, not her appetite. That's the cruel genius of illusion. You can starve in front of a feast, and people will call it elegance. Morning smells like ink, wool, and stale bread. The fire sulks, and your quill scratches like a small animal testing freedom. Princess lessons began early and ended never. Reading piety, writing thanks, rehearsing the same 4 virtues until they fit like cuffs. Education wasn't curiosity, it was brand management. Letters taught you how to say nothing beautifully. It's corporate PR in velvet. You copy a saint's sentence again, and the page looks obedient enough to pass for character. The music room tastes of dust and lemon oil. A lute waits with its polite gut strings. You practice scales while a tutor counts, as if rhythm alone could invent happiness. Queens-to-be learned music not to create but to decorate silence at dinners. Harmony was social grease. If your arpeggios sounded like peace, negotiations improved. It's astonishing how many treaties rested on women hitting G without wincing. You nail the note and earn permission to breathe. The dance floor squeaks under silk. Chalk dust softens the footprint of fear. Court dances weren't flirtation. They were spreadsheets you performed with your feet, rank, distance, angle, eye. A misstep could read as insult. Proximity had rules long before smartphones. Partners changed with the music, as alliances did. Both were chosen for you. You memorize the pattern until your ankles learn compliance. Compliance, everyone says, is elegance. You bow and call it cardio for dynasties. The embroidery frame smells of linen and hot light. Needlework trained stillness into your hands, flowers on cloth, while real fields starved or flourished elsewhere. Queens stitched gifts for diplomacy, sleeves for an aunt, altar cloths for a bishop, a handkerchief accidentally left with a prince. Threads moved messages where mouths couldn't. It's quiet espionage with daisies, your finger pricks. A bead of blood appears, honest and bright. A maid hides it beneath a silk leaf. The leaf wins. Language lessons taste like chalk and pride. Latin for piety, French for gossip, Italian for music, your mother tongue for letters read by strangers before posting. Words were doors other people held open for you. Fluency meant not slipping. Slipping meant scandal. You learned polite lies in 4 dialects and the truth in none, except the truth, your bones told when chairs finally emptied. You conjugate to endure in several tenses and realize it's irregular everywhere. The chapel is cold and smells of wax and stone. Prayer hour is class in 2, knees aligned, eyes lowered, voice even. Faith here is choreography. Girls who might someday sway countries practice swaying none of themselves. Chaplains preferred your devotion audible but unoriginal. God, it was assumed, liked tidy. You recite the collect and wonder if heaven grades on posture. The organ sighs. You match its breath and earn a minor absence of guilt. Etiquette drills arrive with tea that tastes like water that new leaves once. You learn where a fork sits, where your gaze rests, where your hands go when your heart panics. Manners were armor measured in teaspoons. Etiquette promised that if everyone followed the map, nobody would bleed on the carpet. It mostly worked for carpets. You balance a saucer on a pulse that refuses to be hired. A smile invoices the room. Payment received. Dignity pending. Genealogy lessons smell of glue and vellum. A herald points at trees where branches look suspiciously strategic. Marriages as mergers, births as quarterly reports. Your name appears on 3 possible lines, like a placeholder in a contract. Here, he says, tapping futures that are not yours. Royal daughters were logistics with jewelry. Dowries moved armies without marching. You nod as if examining art. And a tutor praises your discernment. Really, you're deciding which branch creaks least in wind. Hunting talk wafts leather and dog. You are taught to admire the kill while never being allowed to chase it. Princesses cheered from pavilions, pretty flags, careful wrists. Blood was educational from a distance. It mattered because mercy had to look intentional, not naive. You practiced looking moved but not messy, firm but not frightening. Leadership, everyone agreed, should smell faintly of lavender. You hold the embroidered glove to your face and pretend not to sniff steel. The audience chamber tastes of dusted carpets and old perfume. Petitioners kneel. You nod. Clerks record. This is performance feedback for a nation. Your words are chosen to heal without promising medicine, to comfort without spending coin. If you're young, they call it angelic. If you're older, they call it wise. If you disagree, they call it war. You master the sentence that closes doors gently. People leave feeling heard. Nothing moves. The crown purrs. Afternoons teach you invisibility. You practice walking with 3 sounds: fabric, breath, intent, and no fourth. Servants step aside, nobles step forward, and you become a climate people dress for. Climate isn't thanked, it's endured. Your tutor says presence, meaning absence, that photographs well. You study the skill of being the room's softest object. It's harder than it looks. The window shows weather doing whatever it wants. You envy clouds their job security. At dusk, your governess reviews the day with lavender water and a ledger. You tick boxes. Piety performed. Harmony maintained. Lineage not endangered by opinions. Achievement feels like linen folded sharply, satisfying, then invisible. The lessons worked. They're supposed to. Congratulations, you are now universally admired and personally unnecessary. You smile, the approved sighs, and the governess writes, composed. She blows out a candle. Darkness arrives, standardized and polite, ready to teach sleep its cues. Night smells of warm linen, beeswax, and old smoke trapped in heavy curtains. The bed is a small stage, canopy above, carved saints scolding from the posts, mattress softer than choices. Health here moves by ceremony. A pitcher stands ready with rose water. The warming pan leaves its metallic sigh at your feet. Comfort is designed, not spontaneous. You lie down where lineage expects and feel. The bed accepts you like a ledger accepts numbers. Bath day smells like stewed herbs and boiled linen. The room turned into a soft apothecary. Baths weren't daily. They were events with witnesses, physicians, attendants, someone's sense of modesty hovering like a chaperone. Warm water promised relief and delivered politics. Who pours? Who scrubs? Who looks away? Hygiene mattered because rumors do. If you smelled human, enemies called it sin. You lower into warmth and think about rivers that never needed a schedule to forgive. Skincare arrives as pastes with romantic names and alarming ingredients. Mercury for freckles, vinegar for pores, arsenic wafers promising radiance from within. Radiance sometimes meant funerals with excellent music. Beauty chased health like a cat chases a bell it's wearing. You dab the cream because no is less persuasive than everyone. The scent bites, then sweetens like apologies performed on repeat. In the mirror, compliance glows. Your blood writes a quiet letter no one reads. Hair smells of smoke and rosemary oil. Pins bite scalp like opinions with teeth. Elaborate coiffures were architecture, towers of compliance held together by beeswax and patience. A lady-in-waiting counts strokes as if arithmetic could tame nerves. Hair signaled status, mood, fertility. It was a bulletin board before pamphlets. You sit very still while someone else builds a landmark on your skull. Tourists, also called courtiers, will admire it later without tipping. Under the silk, the body keeps its own minutes, cramps folding you into private shapes, fevers turning blankets into arguments, pregnancies announced to you last. Menstruation was laundry with theology, midwives navigated pain as politics, miscarriages became rumors before condolences. A princess's womb was a conference room with poor acoustics. You press a warm brick to your belly and it tells the only truth aloud. Relief is temporary and still worth everything. Teeth ache under sugar disguised as flattery. Marzipan roses, candied peel, sweet wines poured like compliments. Dentistry is older than mercy, remedies taste of clove, smoke, and expensive hope. A court smile often hid blackened molars, icons of abundance's revenge. Portraits solve the problem with closed mouths. You rinse with wine because someone swears by it. Pain goes quiet like a sulk, not a surrender. You schedule a prayer and call it healthcare. Fleas ignore rank. Curtains, dogs, velvet cushions, parliament for insects. Courtiers burned rosemary, servants beat mattresses, everyone scratched with impressive restraint. Flea traps baited with blood sat like tiny negotiations under beds. Royal skin learned humility one bite at a time. If democracy ever existed in palaces, it was insect-based and bipartisan. You lift the sheet and let the bed breathe. The itch pauses, offended by fresh air. You label that of victory. Sleep clothing smells of starch and lavender. Nightgowns were modesty in fabric form, ribbons at throat, laces at wrist, layers to keep privacy faithful. Privacy obeyed until the physician visited at dawn, chart in hand, servants assembled. Symptoms were cooperative theatre, consent a rumour. Bodies signed contracts they never saw. You point to your ribs where the corset bruised and the doctor recommends fewer feelings. The advice is noted and quietly disobeyed. Chamber pots thumped under beds like unsent letters. Perfumed cones and pomanders pretended air had boundaries. Tapestries believed them. Sanitation worked on a curve of optimism. At night, you listened to corridors flush by footmen, silent, swift, scandal-proof. In the morning, rooms smell faintly of orange peel and denial. Architecture learned to host humanity without admitting it. You open the window a finger's width and name the draft honesty. Childbirth smelled of tallow, sweat, panic fought with prayers. Queens labored as nations held breath. Midwives worked miracles. Politicians later signed. Success meant christenings and silver. Failure meant black cloth on the chapel rail and careful histories. The body risked itself so banners could wave. You squeeze a hand, yours, someone's, the kingdom's, and vow to remember the midwife's name, though the chronicle won't. She nods once, then asks for clean water and silence. Illness brought oranges if you were loved and leeches if you were unlucky. Physicians debated humours while servants boiled broth, the only medicine that consistently worked. Recovery wasn't private, it was audience by appointment, sympathy measured in bouquets. Health, like beauty, proved governance. A coughing princess meant shaky policy. You sip broth that tastes like kindness, disguised as chicken, and feel your bones, consider forgiveness. They decide to postpone rebellion until spring. At last, candles shrink to wicks. The room cools to a memory of the day. You stretch the sore places and discover new ones. Your body has become a ledger of other people's plans, entries in bruises, marginalia in headaches, signatures in scars. You pull the sheets to your chin and grant your bones 10 short minutes of ownership. 10 minutes is a monarchy when nobody interrupts. Sleep arrives, late but loyal, and crowns you quietly where no one else can. The vault smells of velvet, iron, and candle soot. Wealth with a metallic aftertaste. On a cushion lies the crown, smaller than you'd expect, colder than you'd hope. The gold is heavy, the jewels sharp where they press against skin. It looks like power, but feels like migraine. You lift it carefully, and the metal sighs, a sound halfway between reverence and warning. The air itself seems to hold its breath as the crown approaches its next hostage. A coronation begins long before the ceremony. Tailors sew prayers into sleeves, Priests rehearse blessings, courtiers sharpen smiles. The crown itself is inspected like a weapon. People pretend it's holy, but everyone knows its true purpose is containment. Gold makes a fine fence. When the princess is fitted, attendants tilt her chin just so, ensuring the weight rests evenly on her skull. They call it adjustment. It feels more like alignment. Spine, neck, will. Under the ringing of choirs, she learns her first real lesson. Pageantry is pain choreographed into grace. The crown pinches, the incense burns, the air turns into honey you can't swallow. Every step down the aisle is a negotiation between dizziness and dignity. The congregation gasps, not from faith, but from fear. If she falters, the whole illusion might crack. You realize how fragile divine right looks up close. The priests speak of God's will, the nobles of destiny, the people of beauty. No one mentions the seamstress who fainted sewing the train, or the servant whose hand blistered polishing the jewels. Crowns are collective delusions manufactured by exhaustion. The ceremony glitters, yes, but it also sweats. The smell of perfume and fear mix into a scent history calls majesty. It's not unpleasant, just complicated, like the truth beneath applause. When the crown is finally set on her head, she feels taller for a heartbeat, then shorter forever. The metal presses not just on scalp, but on identity. From this moment on, she belongs to adjectives: regal, graceful, pure. There's no room left for verbs. Crowns turn people into symbols, and symbols don't get weekends. She learns to keep her chin high so no one sees her looking for the exit. Later, the hall echoes with celebration. Trumpets, banners, sweet wine poured into nervous laughter. Her smile becomes a second crown, lighter but no less binding. Guests approach with compliments that sound like veiled orders. "You carry it so well," they say. What they mean is, keep carrying it. She nods, feeling the weight of every expectation balanced precariously on bone and etiquette. In her private chamber, when the music fades, the real coronation begins. She removes the outer layers, cloak, jewels, patience, until only the crown remains. Her scalp throbs. The imprint will last for hours. She studies her reflection and wonders if this is what authority feels like: soreness mistaken for strength. Outside, fireworks announce her glory. Inside, a single candle tries to keep up. The next morning, the crown rests again on velvet, innocent as a pet between owners. She touches it with 2 fingers, half out of duty, half out of disbelief. Yesterday, it crowned her. Today, it accuses her of hesitation. Crowns, like gods, enjoy consistency. She bows her head again, this time to the inanimate. Objects that outlive people often win arguments by default. She begins to notice how everyone else carries invisible crowns. The queen with her reputation, the servants with their silence, the guards with their orders. Each weight adjusted for rank. Maybe the real punishment of royalty isn't the crown itself, but how it teaches everyone else to envy their own chains. She laughs quietly, the sound swallowed by the drapes. Irony, she learns, is the only crown that fits comfortably. At dinner that night, she feels the ache under her hairline, a dull pulse where gold once sat. No one mentions it, of course. Pain without scandal is just atmosphere. She holds her goblet with practiced poise and feels the ghost of the crown humming behind her skull. A reminder that power, once worn, never truly comes off. Some people mistake that vibration for confidence. She knows it's just the echo of restraint. When sleep finally comes, she dreams of simpler headwear, wreaths of flowers, ribbons of silk, even the warm press of sunlight through loose hair. She wakes smiling, then remembers where she is. The pillow smells faintly of perfume and irony. Outside, bells call her to morning mass. She rises, smooths her gown, and touches her temple. The ache is gone, but the lesson stays. The crown was never too heavy. The fantasy was. The chapel smells of lilies, wax, and unspoken panic. Rows of candles bend toward her like witnesses pretending to pray. The princess stands beneath an arch of embroidered vows, each stitch a bargain she didn't negotiate. The groom waits, distant but punctual, wrapped in silk and strategy. It's less a marriage than a merger, a treaty disguised as tenderness. Love is present only as rumor, escorted out before the choir begins. The gown trails behind her like debt. Every pearl is a signature, every jewel a clause. Somewhere in the kingdom, a girl her age marries for laughter, or at least for luck. Here, the room holds its breath as two families swap futures. The priest drones about unity while both sides calculate grain exports in silence. It's impressive how faith can multitask when gold is on the table. The vows are simple: obedience, loyalty, fruitfulness. She says them clearly, the way her tutor taught. Each syllable is a door locking quietly. The groom replies with confidence, perhaps rehearsed, perhaps indifferent. When the ring slides onto her finger, it feels cold enough to bruise. Rings, like crowns, are promises disguised as ornaments. They tighten with time. You can't tell where jewelry ends and jurisdiction begins. The kiss is brief, chaste, efficient. Applause follows like rainfall on a tin roof, steady, impersonal. Somewhere, musicians strike the opening notes of celebration. The air smells of sweat, trapped under velvet. Marriage, as history practiced it, was a transaction with hymns. She keeps her posture immaculate, smiling just wide enough to imply hope but not desire. Desire has no place at these altars. It ruins bookkeeping. During the feast, her new husband discusses alliances while she calculates escape routes between courses. He's kind enough, in the way a banker might be to good collateral. His words hover like perfumed fog, polite, vague, practiced. When he laughs, it's the sound of someone who's never been alone long enough to think. She answers with nods and perfectly timed silence. Silence is her dowry now. That night, the bedchamber smells of wine, waxed, and uncertainty. The candles are too many, as if the witnesses refused to leave. He speaks of duty, she listens to the rain. The world expects consummation, but expectation itself fills the room so densely that nothing else can fit. Sometimes history assumes too much about what happens behind closed curtains. Not every union produces heirs. Some produce only insomnia. Days blend. She learns the rhythm of shared loneliness. Morning greetings like business meetings, meals eaten in polite proximity, conversations shaped by caution. Marriage turns out to be another form of surveillance. Two people guarding the same secret, that affection can't be legislated, yet, when they appear in public, they glow convincingly. That's the skill of royalty, turning endurance into spectacle. Letters arrive from the kingdom, congratulating them on happiness neither of them claimed. They sign replies together, the ink thick with diplomacy. Happiness becomes a shared project managed by scribes. The people believe it. Faith is cheaper than evidence. Meanwhile, the couple practices intimacy the way musicians practice scales, technically flawless, emotionally absent. The world applauds anyway. Months later, she starts wearing simpler dresses at home, lighter fabrics that let her breathe. The courtiers call it humility, she calls it survival. The ring still pinches, but she's learned to twist it casually when nervous. A small rebellion disguised as habit. He notices once, asks nothing, and that silence becomes their first honest conversation. In time, they grow almost fond of each other, like neighboring countries too exhausted to fight. Mutual tolerance masquerades as peace, and peace is good press. Sometimes he brings her books, sometimes she lets him win at chess. History will record them as harmonious. It won't mention that harmony often sounds like two instruments playing quietly enough not to disturb the rest of the orchestra. Years later, when she sees young brides entering chapels with trembling hope, she smiles softly, not out of bitterness, but recognition. Fairy tales end at the altar because what follows wouldn't sell. The truth behind the princess fantasy isn't tragedy, it's tedium. A lifetime of polite applause for vows no one remembers writing. And yet, she stays graceful, because grace is cheaper than freedom and easier to wash from silk. The throne room smells of polished wood, rosewater, and old perfume reheated by candlelight. Courtiers hover like moths drawn to hierarchy. You sit where the light hits your face just right, and suddenly you're valuable again. The princess's smile is the national currency, soft enough to calm, bright enough to distract, a treasury made of expression. Every grin funds another peace treaty, another rumor, another carefully managed illusion of happiness. Even exhaustion must look radiant. Your cheeks ache after the first hour. Muscles trained for charm are still muscles, and they tire like anything mortal. But here, fatigue is treason. You smile at ambassadors, bishops, and bored relatives, each expecting a slightly different version of grace. It's a strange economy, powered by approval and patience. History calls it diplomacy. You call it facial labor. The crown may weigh ounces, but the expression it demands weighs seasons. When laughter erupts in the hall, it never quite reaches the eyes. Laughter at court is strategic, a weapon disguised as delight. Someone tells a joke about peasants that isn't funny but earns applause anyway. You join in, quietly, because silence here sounds like rebellion. Humor serves hierarchy. Everyone laughs, but not too much. Everyone's included, but no one's equal. Even mirth has etiquette. You manage a perfect laugh, the kind that means everything and nothing. Flattery is the kingdom's most renewable resource. You're radiant, they say. Wiser every year. Compliments here are recyclable. They bounce off walls, change owners, and come back polished. You nod, pretending the words still taste new. Inside, you wonder if sincerity is extinct or just endangered. Either way, extinction gets better press. The more they adore you, the less they see you. Adoration, it turns out, is just invisibility wearing jewels. During audiences, your smile becomes a mask of mercy. Petitioners kneel, confess, cry, and you nod with mathematical empathy. You've learned to look moved without being moved, a skill more prized than literacy. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you keep score. How many smiles equal one policy change? The answer, as always, is 0. But people sleep better believing in faces. You lend them yours, interest-free. Even meals demand performance. You lift a spoon the way a saint lifts relics. Every bite is applause choreography. Etiquette manuals insist that serenity during soup prevents rebellion. You believe them because disbelief takes energy. The servants notice everything: tremors, sighs, missing appetite. They are your unofficial biographers, chronicling each moment of composure. One day, someone will say you ate like royalty. They'll never mention the hunger hiding between gestures. On holidays, when the poor line up for blessings, you stand on a balcony and wave. The crowd's roar feels holy and hollow at once. Children throw flowers, soldiers salute, bells compete with wind. It looks like unity, but it sounds like obligation. The people don't see the faint tremor in your hand or the way your ribs ache from standing too still. You keep waving because hope needs choreography, and someone has to supply it. Even solitude has witnesses. Maids dust your thoughts while pretending to fold linens. Guards listen through doors with professional indifference. You learn to whisper to mirrors instead of people. Reflection, at least, keeps secrets. It never interrupts, never corrects, never leaks. The mirror listens, and that's enough. For a second, you imagine your smile cracking, falling away like plaster. Then you practice it again. Smoother this time, almost believable. There are moments, rare, rebellious, when you stop performing. A thunderstorm interrupts a procession. You're caught in rain. Mascara runs like defiance. Everyone gasps, but you laugh. It's real, uncontrollable, alive. The sky applauds with lightning. Later, the attendants will repair your image, but for one heartbeat, you remember how joy feels without audience. The sound still hums in your chest long after the servants finish drying your hair. The smile, once natural, now functions like clockwork. It triggers automatically at compliments, commands, or convenient silences. Sometimes you forget it's there until a child points and says, "She's smiling even when she's sad." You want to thank them for noticing. Instead, you smile wider. The reflex wins again. You realize the body adapts to captivity by teaching itself denial. That's what evolution looks like in velvet. At night, when you finally let your face rest, the muscles twitch, phantom smiles rehearsing for tomorrow. You touch your cheeks and feel the faint sting of repetition. The mirror across the room glimmers faintly in candlelight, as if smirking back. You blow out the flame and lie still, watching darkness reclaim your reflection. For the first time all day, you stop existing for anyone else. And that's worth smiling about. The jewelry box clicks open like confession. Inside, the pearls gleam with the softness of guilt. They look innocent, pale, round, perfect. But their story begins in pain. Each was born from irritation, a grain of sand trapped where it didn't belong. The creature endured it, layered it, turned suffering into beauty. The princess touches them and feels kinship. Pain polished properly earns admiration. That's how the world works, upstairs and underwater. Pearls were symbols of chastity, purity, divine femininity. Men wore crowns. Women wore metaphors. A strand of pearls on her neck told the court she was virtuous, disciplined, compliant. Each bead whispered, "I endured and stayed pretty about it." The necklace wasn't jewelry, it was documentation. Proof that beauty could be silent under pressure. The clasp clicked shut like a sermon's final word. The weight was subtle but constant, like politeness stretched thin. Pearls didn't glitter. They glowed quietly, the way obedience does. They warmed slightly against her skin, a small mercy of contact. Courtiers admired the sheen without wondering what caused it. The more perfect the pearl, the deeper the wound that birthed it. Pain makes better decoration than pleasure. Pleasure ends too soon. Pain can be worn for decades. At dances, the pearls caught candlelight like secrets pretending to behave. Men praised their luster, comparing them to moonlight, virtue, or milk. Metaphors chosen by people who'd never worn discomfort for hours. She smiled, nodding, feeling the strand rub against her collarbone with the rhythm of diplomacy. Compliments slid off like oil. In her mind, she pictured the mollusk, stubborn and soft, turning irritation into currency. The church loved pearls, symbols of divine endurance. Priests compared them to souls purified by suffering. It was an attractive theology, pain as progress, submission as beauty. Easy to preach when someone else does the enduring. She attended sermons nodding at metaphors, understanding too well. It's strange how men find poetry in women's discomfort. Stranger, still how women learn to rhyme along, to survive inside stanzas they didn't write. Sometimes, late at night, she'd unclasp the necklace and listen to the faint pop as pearls rolled into her palm. They felt alive, like tiny hearts remembering pressure. She'd close her fist around them, testing their smooth defiance. Freedom, she realized, feels like texture, uneven, risky, real. The pearls were perfect because they'd stopped fighting. Maybe that's why society adored them. The next morning, she'd put them on again. Routine is stronger than revelation. Servants would fasten the clasp, hands trembling slightly, not from reverence, but fear of breaking something valuable. Jewelry teaches hierarchy better than sermons. Everyone learns what they can and cannot touch. She thanks them softly and adjusts the strand so the scar from yesterday's irritation stays hidden. During portraits, painters exaggerated their glow, adding divine shimmer to mortal fatigue. Future generations would see purity, not chafing. That's how history edits women, smooths their edges, polishes their patience. The portrait smiles forever, while the real skin beneath once burned. You could almost laugh at the consistency. Even art learns to lie politely. At court, gossip spread like perfume. Who wore sapphires? Who preferred diamonds? Who earned pearls? The hierarchy of adornment mapped morality. Diamonds meant power, rubies, passion, emeralds, wisdom. Pearls, endurance. Always endurance. It's poetic, isn't it? That the most fragile stone became the emblem of stability. Fragility pretending to be strength. The perfect metaphor for womanhood under surveillance. When the strand finally breaks, as all bindings do, pearls scatter across the marble floor like applause in reverse. Servants rush to collect them, panic in their movements. She just watches. There's beauty in the mess, the randomness, the refusal to stay strung. A pearl rolls to her slipper and stops, patient, waiting for her decision. She doesn't move. For once, she lets beauty rest where it falls. And when the necklace is repaired, something small has changed. The glow feels different, colder, aware. The pearls have seen freedom, even if briefly. So has she. That night, when she removes them again, she doesn't sigh. She smiles. Perfection, after all, is exhausting. Imperfection, though, that's starting to look divine. The morning begins with footsteps that aren't hers, soft, precise, familiar. The servant's arrival always smells of starch, lavender, and quiet judgment. She moves through the room like wind pretending to obey geometry, folding gowns, refilling basins, avoiding eye contact. The princess sits before the mirror, pretending not to see the reflection of exhaustion that doesn't belong to her. In a castle of whispers, the servant is both ghost and witness, the keeper of someone else's privacy. She knows the princess's secrets better than any diary would. She's seen tears wiped with silk sleeves, letters burned too late, bruises hidden under lace. Loyalty here is transactional, built on silence and shared fatigue. The servant curtsies, never too deeply, and adjusts a ribbon. Their hands brush for a moment. No words, just a spark of mutual recognition. Two women surviving the same cage, one gilded, one invisible. Rank divides them, but fatigue unites them. The servant's hands are calloused, but her touch is careful. She buttons, tightens, arranges. Every gesture is fluent in hierarchy. The princess wonders when care becomes choreography. "You're pale, my lady," the servant says softly. "That's fashionable," she answers, smiling through lead powder and irony. They both know it isn't a joke. The servant nods, as if agreeing with the world's madness is part of her job description. Maybe it is. Servants hear everything. Gossip travels downward faster than blessing. They know who fights, who prays, who pretends. When they kneel, it isn't reverence, it's survival. The princess often wonders what the servants say when she leaves the room. Do they pity her? Mock her? Or worse, understand her? Understanding is dangerous. It blurs lines. She hopes they gossip. Gossip is safer than empathy. At dinner, she catches her servant watching from the shadows, not intrusively, just alert, protective. A glance that says, "I see what they don't." It's unsettling and comforting in equal measure. The servant vanishes when nobles approach, the way truth does when ceremony begins. Nobility can't exist too close to recognition. The illusion requires blindness. Gratitude, too, must be invisible to stay pure. One winter, the servant falls ill. A cough, then a fever. The court barely notices. Servants vanish the way candles do, replaced, relit, unremembered. But the princess notices. She sends broth, blankets, prayers disguised as orders. The doctor arrives late, performs concern, and leaves. Weeks pass before the woman returns, thinner, quieter. When she resumes her duties, their eyes meet in the mirror again. For once, neither pretends not to be human. During festivals, the servant laces her corset tighter than usual. "For the shape," she says. "For the performance," the princess replies. Both smile, knowing the words mean the same thing. In another world, they'd be sisters or rivals or simply tired friends. Here, they're parts of the same costume, different fabrics, same function. Society loves contrast. It gives the illusion of balance. Sometimes, after everyone sleeps, the princess leaves a slice of cake or a book by the servant's cot. Not charity, not guilt, just an acknowledgement of shared endurance. The next morning, the gift is gone and the air feels lighter. Gratitude, spoken aloud, might ruin it. Quiet kindness, she's learned, survives longer when hidden. Years later, when the princess falls sick, it's the same servant who tends to her. The roles blur again, the touch firmer now, the care less ceremonial. "You've been good to me," the princess whispers. "You've been seen," the servant replies. It's the truest blessing ever exchanged in a room that hosted thousands of empty ones. The world outside keeps pretending to function. Inside, two women invent honesty in whispers. When the end finally comes, the servant closes her eyes, smooths her hair, and lights a candle. Duty fulfilled, devotion unrecorded. History won't mention her name. Chronicles prefer crowns to hands. But the room will remember the smell of wax, the hush of genuine grief, the strange equality of mortality. For once, there's no hierarchy, just silence, finally polite enough to mean peace. And years after, when tourists wander through the palace, admiring gowns behind glass, no one notices the faint burn mark on the floor where that final candle fell. The guide calls it imperfection. The stone disagrees. It calls it truth. The gallery smells of dust, oil paint, and time pretending to be eternal. Portraits line the walls, queens, princesses, saints, all staring with the same calm defiance. Their eyes follow you, as if amused by your modern disbelief. The princess's own portrait hangs near the center, framed in gold that glows softly even in dim light. The air around it hums with reverence. She stands frozen in perfect grace, serene, untouched, almost divine. Lies rarely age this beautifully. The painter was kind or perhaps complicit. He softened wrinkles, tamed the jawline, adjusted posture. He erased truth the way light erases shadow, gently, systematically. The final result pleased everyone except the subject. "You've made me look holy," she said. "Majesty required it," he answered. The brush, it turns out, was just another crown. She signed her approval, smiling. Disagreement wasn't fashionable. Each detail in the portrait was an argument disguised as art. The tilt of the head signaled virtue, the color of the dress piety, the absence of background poverty. Pain was edited out like bad lighting. The pearls gleamed obediently. The eyes, though, they carried rebellion in microscopic brushstrokes. Painters often smuggled honesty where patrons wouldn't notice. Centuries later, historians call it subtext. She called it survival. When the portrait was unveiled, courtiers gasped on cue. Compliments filled the room like incense. Radiant, majestic, eternal. The applause echoed longer than sincerity deserved. She stood there, smiling at her own fiction, and realized immortality felt suspiciously like entrapment. Art, she thought, is the prettiest prison ever built. It traps you at your most palatable moment and never lets you age out of it. The painting traveled more than she ever did. It crossed seas, hung in palaces, museums, collections. Each generation projected new fantasies onto her stillness. Some saw innocence, others saw arrogance. None saw fatigue. That's the trick of portraiture. It turns humanity into wallpaper for ambition. The frame may change, the illusion doesn't. She remains exactly as the world prefers, silent and compliant. Restorers, centuries later, scrape at layers of varnish, their brushes whispering apologies. Beneath the gloss, the colors breathe again. The flesh tones warm, the shadows return. A faint line, once hidden, reappears at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, a smirk. Viewers debate its meaning endlessly. Scholars publish essays. But you, standing close enough, can tell. It's relief. She's been waiting centuries to look honest again. Art historians praise the timeless dignity of her posture. They don't see how her hand grips the chair too tightly, or how her necklace sits slightly askew, as if she moved during the sitting. Movement wasn't allowed in portraits, yet hers insists on existing. It's as if the painting itself resists eternity. You feel it too. The quiet pulse of rebellion trapped in oil and varnish. Even stillness, it seems, can remember motion. Children on school trips giggle and point. "She looks bored," one says. The teacher laughs awkwardly, steering them towards safer adjectives. Bored isn't royal. Bored isn't marketable. But the child was right. That gaze, frozen through generations, is the look of someone who's seen too much ceremony and not enough sky. Boredom, in this context, was the closest thing to freedom available. During restoration, someone finds a hidden signature in the lower corner, the painter's apprentice, not the master. A young woman's initials, carefully disguised. History almost erases her, too. You can imagine the moment she added them, heart racing, hand trembling, wanting just one place where truth survived under gold leaf. Her rebellion still gleams faintly under cracked varnish, a quiet echo of courage. Now the portrait hangs behind glass, climate-controlled, adored. Visitors take photos. Filters enhance what paint already lied about. The audio guide calls her the embodiment of grace. You stand before her, aware that she's watching back. Maybe she's amused by the persistence of fantasy. Maybe she's warning you. Either way, the message hums beneath the centuries. Never mistake composure for contentment. The frame always wins. Until someone looks closer. And if you linger after closing hours, when the gallery goes dark, you might swear her eyes shift, not by miracle, but memory, as if, finally, she's looking not at admirers, but at witnesses. You blink, and the illusion resets. The guards call it lighting. The painting calls it breathing. The night smells of rain and rebellion. The castle sleeps under a quilt of thunder, every flash of lightning painting the walls silver for half a breath. You feel it too, that electric hum that tempts even the obedient to remember freedom. The princess stands by the open window, barefoot on cold stone, the wind tugging her hair into knots. Beyond the garden lies the forest, black and promising. For once, the dark looks kind. Her cloak waits, folded neatly beside a single candle. Inside its fabric hides a crumb of bread, a flask of water, and a hope too small to name aloud. She's read stories about brave souls who leave in search of truth, but none of them mention the weight of quiet, or how fear smells like wax and wet wool. Still, she steps closer to the window. The rain kisses her face as if testing her courage. It tastes like permission. Every life has a moment when fantasy fractures into decision. This is hers. She glances back at her sleeping chamber. The carved bed, the embroidered saints watching from the walls, the pile of letters written but never sent. All of them whisper, "Stay." History prefers its heroines patient, not disobedient. But something in her chest insists otherwise. Maybe it's madness, maybe it's memory, maybe it's the sound of herself, finally thinking too loudly. She lowers one foot onto the sill. The cold bites, but she smiles. Pain always felt more honest than praise. Lightning flashes, and for a moment, the world is clear. The courtyard below, the stables beyond, the faint line of trees on the horizon. Freedom, measurable in paces. She could do it. She could run. But thunder answers, deep and godlike, reminding her that even the sky has chains. Her breath trembles but doesn't retreat. Behind her, the door creaks. "My lady," it's the servant, the same one who knows too much. The candle flickers between them. its light like judgment. "Go back to sleep," the princess whispers. "So should you," the servant replies, stepping closer. Neither moves for a long time. The air thickens with unspoken understanding. One cannot leave without the other, losing everything. Freedom is contagious, and contagion is punished. The servant reaches for the window, closing it softly. "The rain will ruin your gown," she says, voice trembling with more than weather. The princess laughs, a quiet, broken thing. It already has. The laugh turns into something wetter, heavier, not quite tears, not quite surrender. The storm outside continues, unbothered. Nature doesn't need permission to be wild. Humans invented etiquette for that. They sit on the floor, backs to the window, sharing silence like stolen fruit. The candle melts into itself, sighing each time thunder rolls. The princess whispers, "If I ran, would you come with me?" The servant hesitates. "Where?" The question is the answer. Nowhere safe, nowhere possible. But the idea alone warms them both for a heartbeat. Imagination is rebellion's rehearsal. They let it play once, then fold it neatly away. By dawn, the storm has passed. The world smells washed, almost forgiving. She watches sunlight crawl across the rug, soft and golden like an apology. The gown hangs heavy with rainwater, its hem dark as guilt. She presses her hand to the window, feeling the faint warmth of morning replace the cold of temptation. Freedom, she decides, is better imagined than punished. For now. Years later, she'll remember that night as both tragedy and triumph. Tragedy because she stayed. Triumph because she considered leaving. Most people never get that far. The thought alone can be enough to shift the spine, a secret posture change towards selfhood. She carries that memory like a hidden gem, unpolished, unspoken, undeniably hers. The servant never mentions it again, but sometimes, when the weather turns and thunder hums in the distance, they exchange a glance. A quiet acknowledgement between co-conspirators who almost rewrote history. The world never noticed, of course. Castles are designed to erase near misses, but the air remembers. It always does. And if you stand by that same window centuries later, you might still smell rain in the stone. A ghost of courage, faint but persistent, lingering where someone once almost chose herself. The great hall bursts with light, warmth, and exhaustion. Candles bloom in every corner, painting gold over the cracks in the walls. The smell is rich, roasted meat, honeyed wine, melted wax, perfume heavy enough to blur thought. Musicians play the same melody they've played for years, a song so practiced it's forgotten how to feel. The princess sits at the head table, surrounded by laughter that sounds rehearsed. Tonight is celebration, or the closest imitation available. Feasts were the kingdom's favorite form of denial. The bigger the problem, the grander the menu. The priest blesses the meal with a voice trembling from both age and anticipation. Platters arrive like theatre props, birds reassembled after roasting, pies that sparkle with gold leaf, fruit carved into emblems of loyalty. Every dish whispers, "Nothing is wrong." The court believes it. Belief pairs beautifully with dessert. She smiles, raises her goblet, performs delight. Across the room, lords debate philosophy they don't understand, and ladies trade compliments sharp enough to bleed. The air hums with politeness, the most civilized form of hostility. The princess listens, amused. Every sentence here is a weapon wrapped in lace. It's not malice, exactly. It's survival through conversation. You eat with your mouth, you conquer with your tone. A minstrel sings a ballad about eternal love, written by a monk who never met any. The crowd sighs at the chorus, mistaking rhyme for truth. She claps softly, appreciating the craftsmanship of deception. After all, she's fluent in it. The song fades, applause blooms, another course arrives, this one steaming with flattery. "To your beauty, my lady," says a duke. "To your fortune," she replies. Toasts are duels in liquid form. She never loses. The feast stretches late into night. The laughter grows louder, the lies easier. Courtiers loosen collars, maids refill goblets. Someone trips over a dog. The illusion begins to crack, revealing small glimpses of honesty, a stifled yawn, a drunk confession, a servant's glare. For a few minutes, the hall feels human again. Then the musicians change key, and the spell resets. Order, like hunger, always returns. From her seat, she studies faces, each one wearing its own version of her smile. The king hides worry behind appetite, the queen hides grief behind jewels, even the jester hides despair behind punchlines. It's comforting in a way, realizing everyone's pretending. Pretending isn't deceit, it's communal endurance. The hall becomes a cathedral of collective performance, each candle a confession that no one dares speak aloud. Midway through the night, a gust of wind sneaks through the windows, extinguishing 3 candles. Superstition ripples instantly. Someone whispers of omens, someone else laughs too loudly. The princess watches the smoke twist upward and thinks, maybe truth is like that, visible only when light fails. She drinks slowly, tasting the burn of honesty disguised as wine. For a moment, she almost feels alive. By midnight, dancers fill the floor. She joins them out of obligation, not joy. The music spins her through partners she'll forget by dawn. Lace brushes velvet, perfume mingles with sweat. It's strangely intimate, this shared pretense. Bodies orbiting through choreography that says, "We're fine." When the song ends, applause erupts like relief. Everyone bows, even exhaustion deserves ceremony. Later, she escapes to the balcony. The air outside is cold, tasting of rain and candle smoke. The laughter behind her muffles into something ghostly. Below, the courtyard glimmers under moonlight, still littered with flower petals from some earlier happiness. She exhales, watching her breath dissolve into the night. For a few minutes, she doesn't belong to anyone's story. Just the stars, the chill, and the faint hum of her own pulse. Inside, another toast begins. Her name echoes through the hall, but she doesn't return immediately. The world can survive without its symbol for 5 minutes. She leans on the railing, fingers tracing condensation. Somewhere, a dog barks, a servant laughs, a clock ticks toward inevitability. She smiles, not for them, not for portraits, but for herself. Pretending, when done consciously, starts to look a lot like survival. And when she finally re-enters the hall, no one notices she'd been gone. The illusion remains intact, as all good illusions do. The feast continues, endless and glittering. But the candlelight seems gentler now, as if approving her small rebellion. Sometimes, truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to breathe between the lies. Morning begins with ceremony disguised as routine. The hall smells of ink, parchment, and breakfast reheated. for diplomacy. Courtiers gather like chess pieces, each already in motion before dawn. Today, there's no music, only the sound of hierarchy rehearsing itself. You can hear it in the pacing, the measured greetings, the soft thud of kneeling boots. Politics here isn't waged by swords or decrees, it's waged by smiles, pauses, and how long someone holds eye contact. The princess sits beside her husband, both framed by sunlight pretending to be divine approval. Petitioners enter one by one, bowing at angles that reveal allegiance. Complaints about taxes, requests for land, flattery in full bloom. She listens, nods, pretends to matter. The real decisions are made 3 rooms away by men who use her signature as decoration. Still, she asks questions, small and sharp. It's the only rebellion that doesn't echo. Power at court is like perfume, strong, invisible, and dangerous in excess. You can't touch it, but you can feel when it fills the room. Everyone's chasing the same scent. Proximity. The closer they stand to power, the more fragrant they become. The princess watches them orbit, amused and weary. Ambition smells sweet until it spoils. Then it just smells like sweat. Her husband speaks eloquently about justice while avoiding every truth that might require it. She admires his technique. The audience applauds at the right moments, mistaking rhythm for wisdom. That's politics, poetry with bills attached. The princess interjects once, suggesting leniency for a poor village. The advisors exchange glances like accountants caught off guard by empathy. Her husband thanks her for sentiment. That word weighs more than it sounds. After the session, gossip flares like wildfire. She's growing opinionated, someone whispers. Dangerous, another replies. Men debate her influence as if she's not 3 doors away. Influence, to them, is always scandalous when worn in silk. She learns to modulate her intelligence, bright enough to impress, dim enough to survive. It's a delicate performance, like keeping a candle lit during wind. One breath too strong, and history rewrites you as a cautionary tale. Afternoons bring the sport of flattery. Nobles compete to phrase admiration creatively, as if originality could buy favor. Your grace outshines the lilies. Your wisdom rivals scripture. She's heard them all. Compliments here are inflation, everyone rich in words, bankrupt in sincerity. She responds with equal poetry, trading metaphors like currency. The economy of ego thrives on mutual delusion. Tea hours serve as battlegrounds for invisible wars. Ladies discuss fabric while testing alliances. Every sip conceals strategy. Every glance implies leverage. Gossip isn't cruelty here. It's communication. Secrets move faster than letters, and reputations die in candlelight long before anyone notices the body. The princess listens, smiles, contributes 1 sentence every 10 minutes. Enough to appear alive, never enough to appear threatening. Survival, by understatement. At dusk, diplomacy turns social. The king hosts musicians, courtiers shift into laughter. The mood changes, but the rules stay. You can dance wrong, speak wrong, sit wrong, and exile will find you before dessert. The princess moves carefully, a creature fluent in aesthetic restraint. Her laughter glides just above suspicion. Freedom is dangerous, but so is silence. She threads her way through both like a seamstress of decorum. Later, in her chambers, She writes in her journal, invisible ink of truth between lines of propriety. Today, she writes, I was polite enough to disappear. The candle flickers like applause. History, she knows, will never read these words. That's why they're honest. Her handwriting shakes, but not from fear. From fatigue. There's a difference, though both look the same from a distance. Sometimes she dreams of saying what she thinks out loud, of calling hypocrisy by its name, of laughing mid-sermon, of asking the bishop if holiness ever gets tired of being decorative. She wakes smiling, heart racing, still intact. Dreaming rebellion counts for something. You can't govern a kingdom on rebellion, but you can survive a court with it. That's enough, most days. In the end, she learns that power isn't freedom, it's performance. And politeness, that soft, lethal art, is the script everyone memorizes to avoid getting eaten. She plays her role so well that even truth applauds. The applause is gentle, predictable, and endless, like captivity with better lighting. The chapel smells of myrrh, candle smoke, and polished gilt. Sunlight filters through stained glass in colors too holy to touch. The choir hums a melody older than reason, each note engineered to sound like obedience. The princess kneels at the front, head bowed, hands folded into acceptable shapes. Around her, faith feels less like comfort and more like surveillance. Even God seems to take attendance. Religion in court wasn't belief. It was branding. The church blessed crowns, marriages, armies, and debt, often in that order. Salvation came bundled with politics, forgiveness with taxes. The princess learned early that heaven's hierarchy looked suspiciously like earth's. Priests spoke of humility while wearing gold heavier than her own jewelry. Incense masked contradiction. Sincerity was optional. Attendance mandatory. She prays anyway, out of habit more than conviction. Her words drift upward, thin and polite. Thy will be done, she whispers, though she can't recall ever being asked for hers. The silence that follows feels both merciful and mocking. God, she suspects, enjoys loyal confusion. Faith, after all, functions best when it doesn't answer back. She stays still. Stillness, here, counts as devotion. The bishop preaches about virtue, his voice syrupy with certainty. He speaks of women's purity, men's authority, and the divine wisdom of hierarchy. She watches his rings catch the light, each gem a sermon in hypocrisy. Her thoughts wander, rebellious as candle smoke. If virtue means silence, she's already a saint. If holiness means endurance, she's halfway to heaven. The pew creaks its approval. Confession follows. She kneels, speaks softly through the carved screen. The priest's voice murmurs questions designed to fit everyone and understand no one. Have you been obedient? Have you harbored envy? Have you questioned divine order? She answers carefully. Enough remorse to seem humble, enough vagueness to stay safe. The priest nods as if he's absolving her, but really he's grading her performance. Heaven, she suspects, runs on paperwork. Afterward, she lingers in the empty chapel. Candles hiss softly, their flames tiny empires of control. She studies one until wax drips onto her glove. The pain is quick, clean, almost satisfying. It feels real, unlike the abstract morality floating above. She blows out the candle and watches smoke twist upward, free in ways her prayers never were. Maybe that's what divinity feels like, evaporation, not obedience. In private, she sometimes writes her own psalms, not of praise, but of honesty. Lines about loneliness disguised as faith, gratitude laced with irony. "Dear God," she writes once, "thank you for teaching me how to kneel so beautifully that no one notices I've stopped believing." She folds the paper and hides it in a hymnal. The next day, a maid finds it and mistakes it for poetry. Maybe it is. Religious holidays demand her presence. She sits through hours of ritual, the smell of incense thick enough to coat the lungs. Priests drone, choirs soar, the people kneel. It's theatre, but everyone cries anyway. That's the genius of ritual. Sincerity optional, emotion guaranteed. The princess participates flawlessly. Later, they'll call her devout. She'll call herself consistent. Both are correct. Once, during Lent, she fasts for real, not for appearances, but for clarity. Hunger sharpens her like honesty. Each day, her body grows lighter, her thoughts clearer. She begins to feel something close to peace, not divine, but human. Then the court physician intervenes. "Your grace must eat. Piety is admirable, but frailty is unsightly." So she eats. God forgives her. The mirror doesn't. Faith, she decides, is just another corset, tight enough to keep posture, flexible enough to breathe, too loose, and society panics, too tight, and saints are born. Either way, it hurts. She wears hers politely, because naked conviction would scandalize the room. The bishop calls her an example. He's right. She's proof that you can worship appearance and still look holy doing it. At night, she lights a single candle and prays again. Not to be good or pure or remembered, just to be real. The flame dances without agenda, and for once she feels like something is listening. Maybe it's God, maybe it's herself, maybe, for tonight, they're the same thing. Dawn doesn't arrive, it exhales. Pale light slides across the walls, soft as silk that's forgotten how to shimmer. The castle stretches in slow creaks and sighs, beams remembering they exist. Somewhere, a fire coughs its last ember into surrender. The princess opens her eyes, but doesn't move. The air feels heavy with the kind of stillness that remembers sound. Morning here isn't birth, it's a rehearsal of endurance. Even the sun seems hesitant to intrude. The sheets smell of rosewater, dust, and a faint trace of yesterday's dreams. Servants haven't entered yet. For a few fragile minutes, she belongs only to herself. Her hair spreads across the pillow like spilled ink, chaotic and private. It's beautiful, but not the kind that wins applause. She lets her body stay soft, uncorrected by posture. This is luxury, existing without being seen. The silence hums in approval, ancient and kind. Through the window, the courtyard glows with dew, every blade of grass jeweled with patience. A bird sings one note too early, unsure if it's welcome. The sound trembles in the air, then disappears, embarrassed by its honesty. She smiles. Even birds doubt themselves here. The smile feels unfamiliar, earned, not expected. For a second, she forgets to be anyone's daughter, anyone's symbol. She's just awake, warm, alive. That's rebellion enough. The first footsteps come soft and apologetic. Servants beginning their choreography. A knock, a bow, a flurry of linen. She closes her eyes, pretending sleep. They move around her, efficient as thoughts she doesn't want to have. A wash basin clinks, curtains open. Light enters with professional precision. Her small moment of belonging dissolves politely. That's the etiquette of dawn. Even peace must yield to schedule. They whisper while preparing her gown. Her Grace looks rested. Her Grace dreamed of angels. She hears them but doesn't correct them. It's easier to let myths multiply. Truth would only ruin the narrative. The gown brushes her skin, cool, perfumed, deliberate. Each layer reminds her who she's expected to be. Identity here is fabric, stitched daily, never worn long enough to fray. She exhales, surrendering to the costume of composure. Breakfast arrives with fruit arranged like punctuation. A goblet of water, clear as control, waits beside it. The meal tastes of duty, soft bread, mild cheese, no surprises. She eats slowly, savoring blandness like safety. There's comfort in predictability. Flavor implies emotion, and emotion isn't efficient. Across the table, the bishop blesses the day with the enthusiasm of a man allergic to silence. She nods, chewing reverently. Outside, bells begin to count time. Each ring marks another promise kept for appearances. Servants move through corridors like bloodstream through ritual. The princess watches from the window, detached, amused. Life inside the castle isn't lived, it's maintained. Maintenance passes for meaning. Maybe that's enough. Not every life needs grandeur. Some exist to preserve symmetry. She wonders if heaven works the same way. Tidy, polished, endlessly dull. A gardener kneels by the fountain, pruning roses with surgical calm. The image pulls her attention, beauty trimmed to regulation, thorns negotiated away. The metaphor is exhausting. She turns from the window and laughs softly. Even flowers must behave. The maid looks startled, unsure whether to laugh too. The sound fades quickly, leaving only air that smells faintly of damp petals and resignation. The morning progresses with the elegance of inevitability. Lessons, correspondence, appearances, all rehearsed gestures in a script older than memory. She performs well, as always. Excellence here isn't about brilliance, but about vanishing gracefully into expectation. Her reflection in a polished silver tray confirms it. Serenity achieved through repetition. She's proud in a strange way. Survival, after all, is a form of mastery. By late morning, sunlight floods her desk, warm enough to blur ink. She pauses mid-letter and traces the light with her finger. It feels real, immediate, undeserved. Maybe, she thinks, the sun doesn't care who it shines on. The thought feels scandalous, like touching eternity without permission. She lets it linger. Then she finishes the letter, sealing warmth back inside duty. Some rebellions are small enough to fit under wax. The clock chimes noon. Servants bustle. Voices return. The world reassembles itself around her, predictably, perfectly. But something tiny has shifted, a loosened thread in the tapestry of obedience. It's invisible, but it hums quietly beneath the day. A thought that will never fully fade. Maybe happiness isn't something given. Maybe it's just the brief moment before you're noticed again. And as she walks down the corridor, light trailing her like rumor, she realizes that peace doesn't have to be loud. It only has to be allowed. Beneath the castle, past the kitchens and forgotten doors, lies a garden that doesn't appear on any map. The air there smells of soil, mint, and disobedience. It's a place the servants whisper about. The princess's folly, they call it. But it isn't folly. It's memory. Every flower was planted during nights when sleep refused to visit. Every sprout is a confession made in chlorophyll. The garden thrives in silence, wild but polite about it. The earth feels damp beneath her hands, cool and forgiving. She never wears gloves here. Dirt under fingernails is a luxury no crown allows. She kneels, touching seedlings as if checking for a pulse. Growth, she's learned, doesn't require permission, only patience and a little darkness. Each leaf is a small rebellion, breaking surface quietly, unapologetically. Nature never asks who's watching, it simply begins again. The sound of dripping water echoes softly, rhythmic and slow. It's the closest thing she's found to prayer that answers back. Sometimes she talks to the plants, her voice low and amused. "You're braver than I am," she says, tracing a vine's stubborn curl. The garden doesn't flatter, it listens. In a world obsessed with appearance, listening feels divine. Every green thing here holds her secrets better than stone walls ever did. In one corner, a fig tree stretches toward a gap of sunlight. It shouldn't survive here, yet it does. Its leaves shimmer with confidence. Wide, shameless, defiantly alive. "You don't belong," she tells it, smiling. The tree rustles like laughter. Maybe belonging is overrated. The court taught her to fit in. The garden teaches her to expand. Each root reminds her that life finds loopholes when rules pretend to be absolute. Sometimes the servant joins her, pretending to fetch herbs for the kitchen. They work side by side in comfortable silence, sharing the rhythm of soil and breath. No titles, no curtsies, just two women learning the art of stillness. When they speak, it's in fragments, a memory, a wish, a name no one uses anymore. The air hums with understanding. In the garden, language remembers how to rest. Seasons shift quietly underground. Winter trims the color, but not the courage. Spring returns with its unashamed perfume, demanding attention from the world above. The princess watches buds unfold and feels something unfamiliar. Gratitude without agenda. No one applauds the garden. It doesn't need approval to bloom. "Teach me that," she whispers. A bee drifts past, unbothered. Lesson delivered. She plants one new seed every time she feels unseen. Lilac for patience, thyme for endurance, poppy for dreams. The servants joke that she's growing a pharmacy for the soul. Maybe she is. The act of planting itself feels curative. The soil accepts everything, even sorrow, even irony. And unlike people, it gives something back. Occasionally, she imagines the garden surviving long after she's gone. Roots twisting through foundations, vines scaling walls, flowers creeping into corridors. Nature reclaiming etiquette, petal by petal. The thought makes her smile. Some legacies don't need statues, they just need rain and time. When storms rage above, the garden becomes sanctuary. Rainwater seeps through cracks, pooling into mirrors that reflect branches dancing. Thunder sounds softer down here, like applause muffled by gratitude. She sits beneath the fig tree, damp hem brushing moss, and feels the rare comfort of irrelevance. The world can turn without her consent for a while. She lets it. Years from now, historians will write about her grace, her composure, her poise. None will mention the garden. They'll miss the only place where she ever ruled anything willingly. But the earth remembers differently. And if someone finds it centuries later, roots thriving under ruins, they'll know she existed. Quietly, completely, on her own terms. The hallway breathes differently at night. The torches dim to embers, and the scent of stone becomes sharper, colder, more awake. Footsteps echo in ways they don't during the day, longer, slower, as if time itself is stretching its spine. The princess walks barefoot, guided by habit rather than purpose. Her reflection follows in the dark windows, faint and obedient. She isn't sneaking, she's remembering how silence used to sound before it learned manners. Ghosts in this castle don't moan, they listen. They live in tapestries and mirrors, in furniture too proud to creak. Some say they're ancestors, others say they're regrets. She's met both. They never scare her. How could they? You can't fear what you resemble. Tonight, the air hums with a presence, not malicious, just aware. She exhales slowly, and it exhales back. The conversation feels familiar, like two thoughts colliding across centuries. She stops before a portrait of her younger self, painted years ago when obedience still glittered like promise. The girl in the painting looks luminous, naive, dangerous in her optimism. "You poor thing," she whispers, tracing the gilded frame. "You thought they meant it?" The portrait, of course, doesn't answer, but something shifts in the air and a faint tremor of agreement. Even varnish, it seems, learns regret. Every queen becomes her own ghost eventually. Not the kind that haunts corridors, but the kind that lingers inside rituals. The wave perfected, the tone rehearsed, the smile installed like furniture. Sometimes she wonders if she's already translucent. People look at her and see reflection, not body. That's the curse of symbols. You disappear the moment you're admired. She presses her hand to her chest, relieved to still feel warmth. For now. She continues walking. The corridor grows longer, though she knows it hasn't changed. Shadows stretch and curl at her ankles like tame animals. The castle, too, dreams, murmuring in wood and iron. The floor remembers every step it's endured. You can almost hear centuries rearranging themselves underfoot, tired of holding the same story. The past, like architecture, craves edits. She pauses before a door she's never opened. The handle is cold, dustless, cleaned daily, but never used. On the other side, rumour says, are relics, old crowns, old gowns, old versions of control. She almost laughs. The ghosts must be exhausted, guarding wardrobes of memory. She pushes lightly, and the door yields with a sigh. Inside, the air smells of cedar and forgotten ambition. There they hang, garments of previous princesses, preserved in near worship. Silk yellowed to ivory, embroidery dulled by dust. She touches a sleeve, or it disintegrates softly, like ash made of patience. For a moment, she imagines all those women standing together, comparing regrets. Their silence would be deafening. Ghosts, after all, specialize in politeness. She leaves the fabric alone, unwilling to disturb their rest. In the corner sits a cracked mirror, its silver backing peeling like old authority. She peers into it and sees double, her face and something behind it. the outline of every woman who endured before her. Their eyes look tired, but not defeated. "We made it this far," the reflection seems to say. "Don't let them write you kindly." The message chills and comforts her at once. She bows, instinctively, to the invisible audience. The wind picks up outside, rattling the shutters. Dust rises like memory shaken loose. She closes the door gently, leaving the ghosts to their stillness. In the hallway again, she feels lighter, as if the past just exhaled its blessing. History can suffocate when left unacknowledged. Tonight, it seems content to share oxygen. As she returns to her chamber, the moonlight spills across the floor, creating a soft path home. Her shadow follows, pale but loyal. Ghost and woman, side by side, indistinguishable. She realizes then that haunting isn't punishment, it's continuity. The trick is learning to walk with your ghosts instead of running from them. Before sleep, she whispers into the dark, "Rest now." The walls hum their approval. Somewhere, unseen, another version of her finally does. The desk smells faintly of ink and regret. A single candle burns low, its flame trembling like a secret deciding whether to stay. The princess sits alone, quill poised, parchment waiting. Letters have always been her quiet rebellion. Thoughts smuggled into ink, emotions disguised as syntax. Tonight, the words feel heavier. Maybe because they won't be sent. Maybe because they never were meant to be. She begins carefully, "My dear unknown friend." The phrase feels both safe and true. She doesn't write names anymore. Names get intercepted. Instead, she writes to the idea of understanding, someone, somewhere, capable of reading without judging. The ink flows easily at first, filling the page with stories that history would call improper, laughter that wasn't royal, hunger that wasn't spiritual, longing that wasn't sanctioned. Her handwriting softens as she confesses how the air tastes sweeter outside ceremonies, how freedom hums like wine when she imagines it too long. She writes about mornings that feel heavier than nights, about pretending until pretending becomes muscle memory. There's no bitterness, only exhaustion phrased politely. The tone is measured, almost calm. Rebellion disguised as grace. She knows no censor would notice the treason between the lines. Midway through, she pauses, listening. The castle sleeps, wrapped in its own self-importance. The quill drips quietly onto the blotter. Each drop looks like punctuation for thoughts too honest to survive daylight. She writes again. "Sometimes I think the crown is just a well-decorated echo chamber. Everyone hears themselves and calls it destiny." The sentence makes her laugh, the kind of laughter that startles the dark. She seals the first page with wax, though she knows it will never travel. The gesture feels ceremonial, as if the act of sealing matters more than delivery. That's the nature of hope here. Private, repetitive, quietly absurd. She continues writing about gardens that bloom without witnesses, about songs that comfort only when hummed alone, about the softness of candle smoke when it finally gives up. Her hand cramps, but she doesn't stop. Words spill faster now, lighter, freer. She writes until her heart forgets to filter. "If they ever paint me again," she writes, "tell them to leave the cracks." That's where the light breathes. It's the kind of sentence that doesn't belong in a palace. It belongs in a life. She underlines it twice, smiling at her own audacity. The candle burns low, kissing the edge of the page with warmth. She watches wax pool, imagining it sealing her thoughts in amber. Maybe someone centuries from now will find these words and call them poetry. Maybe they'll call them madness. Both would be correct. Truth, she's learned, depends mostly on timing. When dawn stains the sky, she finishes with a single line. If freedom never comes, at least I named it. Then she folds the letter, ties it with ribbon, and places it inside a drawer no one opens. The gesture feels sacred, like planting something invisible. Some seeds are made of paper. She blows out the candle. The room exhales, relieved. Smoke curls upward, carrying her words to ceilings painted with saints who never had to write for mercy. Maybe they'll read them anyway. Maybe they'll understand that prayer and confession often share the same handwriting. As she lies down, she wonders how many truths survive only because someone was too cautious to share them. The thought soothes her. Secrecy, at least, keeps honesty alive. The wax cools, the ink dries, the unsent letter rests, eternal and safe, whispering to no one and meaning everything. Evening drifts through the castle like a sigh that lost its way. The air smells of candle smoke, worn velvet, and pages that forgot to be read. The corridors glow with the kind of light that flatters age, soft, forgiving, nearly honest. The princess sits by the fire, the crown beside her on the table. Not on velvet this time, not under guard, just resting, like any other tired thing. Gold looks heavier when it's quiet. She studies it without resentment, only curiosity. Once, this metal defined her. Now it just reflects the flame, pretending to be alive. Every dent tells a story, processions, ceremonies, endless nodding under speeches about duty. She touches the rim and feels the faint warmth from the fire. Even gold, it seems, can borrow comfort. For the first time, she wonders if objects ever get lonely when their purpose ends. Outside, wind hums through the shutters like an old hymn forgetting its melody. She listens and hears herself in it, unfinished, wandering, still trying to sound divine. The sound blends with the crackle of the fire until she can't tell which is louder. Her thoughts or the wood surrendering to heat. Both burn quietly, beautifully. That's the only kind of fire allowed in palaces, contained, decorative, supervised by etiquette. She remembers her coronation, the incense, the applause, the ache. Everyone said she glowed. No one noticed she was trembling from weight. Crowns, she's learned, don't crush suddenly. They settle slowly, like dust on furniture. You stop noticing until one day you wake with posture too careful to belong to joy. She leans back, feeling the years pressed into her spine. They fit perfectly. That's the tragedy. The crown catches a spark of firelight, throwing a brief halo on the wall. It looks almost holy. She laughs softly.
Holiness, she thinks, is just lighting with good timing. The jewels sparkle, sapphires, rubies, emblems of conquered places and borrowed labor. Each stone is a captured sunrise, someone else's morning trapped forever. She envies them for holding light longer than people ever could. A servant enters quietly, offering wine. She declines. The servant hesitates, eyes flicking toward the crown.
Shall I polish it, my lady? The question feels strange, like asking if she wants to polish her own burden. No, she says gently. Let it rest. The servant nods, relieved, and leaves. Some silences deserve privacy. The fire approves, settling deeper into orange. She lifts the crown once more, testing its balance. It's lighter than she remembers. Maybe she's stronger now. Or maybe expectation weighs less when you stop believing in it. The metal hums faintly, as if remembering applause. She whispers, "You did your job, so did I." The statement isn't bitter, it's gratitude, translated into fatigue. She sets it down again, careful not to make it sound like an ending. Ash drifts from the hearth, landing softly on gold. The contrast feels poetic, empire meeting erosion. For the first time, she doesn't brush it away. Dust is democracy. Everything returns to it eventually. She watches the grey specks settle into filigree, turning glory into gentleness. The crown looks better this way, honest, humbled, mortal. The fire dies slower than she expects. Shadows stretch their fingers across the room, stroking the edges of ceremony. She closes her eyes and listens to the crackle fade into memory. Somewhere deep inside, she feels the faint echo of applause again, but softer, kinder, closer to forgiveness than celebration. Before bed, she covers the crown with a simple cloth. No ritual, no reverence, just decency. Some endings don't require witnesses. As she blows out the candle, the darkness swells, folding her into peace. The last glow of the embers kisses the metal once more before surrendering completely. For a moment, both seem free, and in that fragile hush, you can almost hear history unclenching its fists. The moon hangs low, pale as porcelain left too long in rain. The castle sleeps, but not deeply. Walls this old never fully rest. The corridors hum with memories, doors breathe, portraits keep half an eye open. The princess stands by the window one last time, her reflection faint and kind. Outside, mist covers the courtyard, turning the world into something gentle enough to say goodbye to. The air smells of wet stone, wax, and something sweeter. Closure, perhaps. She wears no jewels, no crown, only linen soft with age. Her hair falls loose, gravity's final kindness. The fire behind her murmurs instead of roars. Tonight, she isn't performing. Tonight, existence is enough. She touches the glass, feeling the cold seep into her fingertips. It feels more honest than warmth ever did. She thinks about the girl she was, the one who believed kindness guaranteed safety, that beauty could buy peace, that silence was a language of love. That girl was wrong, but bravely so. And maybe that counts for something. Growth, she realizes, is just disillusionment practiced gracefully. You lose faith in one fantasy to earn faith in something quieter. Survival without applause. From the garden below comes the faint rustle of leaves, the sound of life continuing without ceremony. Somewhere, the fig tree she planted has grown tall enough to brush the outer wall. Roots beneath, sky above, balance achieved by accident. She smiles. The thought feels like prayer. Nature, at least, doesn't need permission to flourish. She opens the window wider. Cool air floods the room, carrying distant echoes, laughter from guards off duty, the river murmuring its midnight sermon. The wind tangles her hair, but doesn't apologize. For once, she doesn't fix it. Let it be wild. Let something remain untamed in a life built entirely on control. Her heartbeat slows to match the rhythm of the night. Peace doesn't arrive. It reveals it was here all along. The candle flickers low, its flame bending toward her like an old friend. She thinks about every ceremony she's survived, every smile that paid for silence, every moment of beauty mistaken for contentment. None of it feels tragic now, it just feels finished. Even fairy tales deserve retirement. The idea makes her laugh softly. The sound startles the quiet, then joins it. She sits on the bed's edge, fingers brushing the coverlet embroidered decades ago. The pattern has faded, but the thread holds. So does she. Age, she decides, isn't loss, it's proof of persistence. The world can have its youth and crowns and parades. She'll keep her peace and the smell of rain instead. Both last longer than applause. Her eyes drift toward the corner where the unsent letters sleep, tied with ribbon. She doesn't need to read them anymore. She remembers every word. They were never meant for anyone else anyway. Writing was just a way to stay visible to herself. That's all survival ever demanded, witnessing your own existence. Midnight deepens. The moon tilts lower. The last candle surrenders with a sigh. She lies back, the linen cool against her skin, the darkness soft enough to hold her. Somewhere in the distance, bells murmur toward dawn. She smiles, half asleep, thinking how strange it is that endings always sound like beginnings when you're ready. In another century, someone will tell her story differently. They'll paint her braver, sadder, prettier, simpler. It doesn't matter. The truth has already outlived the fantasy. The dark truth behind the princess dream isn't despair. It's relief. Freedom. Quiet and unspectacular. She breathes once, deeply, peacefully, and lets go of performance forever. Outside, the first bird of morning stirs. Inside, silence crowns itself. Morning arrives without ceremony, no trumpets, no procession, no waiting crowd, just light, gentle, curious, unashamed to touch everything equally. The castle exhales as if relieved that no one is watching. Curtains sway, dust dances in invisible choreography, and time, for the first time, moves at a human pace. The world doesn't mourn her, it simply adjusts, the way nature always does when stories end and life resumes. The servants move quietly, not out of grief, but reverence. They fold sheets, air rooms, and pause occasionally, as if listening for her voice. It doesn't come, but her absence feels kind, not haunting. The air holds a softness that wasn't there before, as though the walls themselves have learned to rest. Even the crown, left under its cloth, seems smaller now, like a relic of a language no one speaks fluently anymore. Down in the garden, the fig tree stretches toward the morning sun. Its leaves shimmer with dew, silver coins of resilience. Birds hop across the soil, unconcerned with history. Roots dig deeper where her hands once worked the earth. The wind hums through the vines like a lullaby sung by the living to honor the tired. It smells of rain, mint, and unfinished dreams. The kind of dreams that feed other ones. In town, life continues. Markets, laughter, gossip, bread. Someone mentions her name over tea, and someone else says she was lovely. That's how history begins to forget. Politely, gracefully. But forgetting isn't always betrayal. Sometimes it's how truth hides in peace. No one builds monuments for quiet revolutions. Yet the earth remembers differently. In its language, rest is rebellion too. Centuries will pass. The portraits will fade, the castle crumble, the crown melt or be stolen. Scholars will argue whether she was kind or cunning, oppressed or powerful, tragic or divine. They'll miss the point, as scholars often do. The truth doesn't fit footnotes. It exists in whispers, in the weight of silk, the pause before laughter, the sigh that only walls heard. Truth prefers subtlety. It hides best when no one thinks to look. And somewhere, a girl will read about a princess and feel envy for her gowns, her jewels, her life of splendor. But if she listens closely, beneath the shimmer of the tale, she'll hear the quiet voice that says, "It wasn't like that." She'll pause, wondering why that feels important. That's how understanding begins. Not with knowing, but with noticing the ache beneath the glitter. The fairy tale will keep its throne in children's books and bedtime stories, but somewhere in the cracks between pages, the darker, truer version will rest. Not cruel, not tragic, just human. A woman who learned that freedom wasn't a gift, but a rhythm inside her bones. A woman who bloomed in secret gardens, wrote unsent letters, and smiled honestly only when no one was looking. That's the kind of royalty the world never paints, so it lasts longer. And if you close your eyes, you can almost hear her still. Not crying, not calling, just breathing. The sound of release. The sound of a story finally allowed to sleep. Her footsteps fade, not into legend, but into peace. That's where all the best endings live, somewhere between myth and mercy. So rest now, traveler. The curtain has fallen, but the truth, soft, slow, and steady, still glows in the dark. The crown gathers dust. The garden grows wild. And the story finally exhales.